Sit. Awake. Okay. The next 90 minutes, 120 minutes is going to be a really lively session because we are going to have a session from a person. He just shows glimpses in the product launch where he really mesmerized the very corporate crowd, the media people. They themselves are in splits when he started showing his session. So he will be double that when he is front of the photographer fraternity. So please keep off all your worries and other things. Just jump into his session. So I'm very glad, Fujifilm India is very glad to have this gentleman all the way flying from the other side of the globe, from the city of Atlanta. And he has just come for this program. In fact, I don't know how many hours of sleep he had, but he will, very small hour actually. But definitely he will ensure that you are not going to sleep for next 120 minutes actually. So without taking much of his time, I would like to introduce the professional photographer for more than 20 years. In fact, he is editorial photographer. He is into commercial photography. He is into, in fact, he likes street photography, if I'm right, which is his passion. And calling onto the stage, before I call, I also like to thank the PEP India team for being the backbone in this initiative of the photography education series. So calling on Mr. Zack Arias, all yours. Thank you.
Hello, hello. Namaste. Is everyone all right? I don't know about delivering 2 times as much as I did. Maybe. I'll at least do 1.2 times as much as I did earlier. So my name is Zack Arias. I am a commercial editorial photographer from Atlanta, Georgia, in the southeast of the United States. And as mentioned, I've been doing this for about 20 years or so. This is my 3rd trip to India that I'm excited about. I've been here to Bombay once before, and I've been to Goa. And I'm really excited on this trip I get to go to Chennai and Delhi. So those are going to be 2 new cities that I get to see. And anytime anyone wants me to come to India, I will gladly get on that very long flight and come here. I love this country. So before I get started, we're doing lighting today. I'm going to give a bit of a lecture. Half of this is a lecture. Then the other half will be demo and putting this stuff into use. But I'd like to kind of get a feel for the room about where everyone sort of stands. It's hard to prepare a lecture because you don't quite know exactly where the audience is. And with such a large audience, I know that we have different levels. So for those of you who'd say, well, I'm a professional photographer working, this is how I make my money. How many of you in the room, you're professional, that's what you do? All right, a good half of you, good. And how many of you, let's go to the opposite side of the spectrum, how many of you are just getting started, like this is kind of new for you, you're working on it as an amateur? Good, 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 good. So a quarter, 1/3 of you. And how many of you are fairly comfortable, but you feel like you still have a lot to learn? And that's me. Okay, great. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go through a part of my workshop. I normally take like all day to teach. I'm going to go a little like fast forward through some of it, some of the technical. So because half of you want the technical, half of you want the demonstration. I got to make all of you happy. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the technical part of lighting. Then we're going to talk about applying that to your photographic life, how I use lights, things that, techniques and modifiers and things like that I use. We'll do live demonstration, shooting some different things up here on stage, and then hopefully we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. All right? So let's get started. If you've ever seen any of my online classes or anything like that, you may have heard me say this quote before. If you haven't heard it, you need to take a picture of it. You need to print it out. You need to put it somewhere on a wall that you'll see every day because it's a very important quote. And it comes from all the way back in 1927. There's a photographer named Edward Weston. And Edward Weston and his contemporaries back in the early 1900s were at the forefront of photography as a vocation, photography as an art form. Back in his day, people as a whole did not believe that photography was art. Photography was simply pointing your camera at something, clicking a picture, and it just recorded like a Xerox copy of whatever was in front of it. It wasn't a painting. It wasn't a sculpture. It wasn't music. Those are art. Photography was not art. So he and his peers had to kind of fight against that. It was also at a time when photography could start to be your source of income. You could start to make money, all right? So Edward Weston was a working photographer. He was an art photographer. He did lots of great portraiture as well. And I want you to think about photography equipment in 1927. There were no flashes. There were no strobes. There were no soft boxes. There was no Lightroom. There was no internet. There was no computer. If you had ISO 50 film, that was high speed, right? High speed film, it was ISO 50 at that time. And this is the quote. The fact is that relatively few photographers ever master their medium. Instead, they allow the medium of photography to master them and go on an endless squirrel cage chase from new lens to new paper, to new developer. We would call that new Photoshop action, new Lightroom preset, to new gadget, to new whatever, camera system, mirrorless, DSLR, medium format, this lens, that lens, the other. Never staying with one piece of equipment long enough to learn its full capacities. Becoming lost in a maze of technical information that is of little or no use since they don't know what to do with it. And that was me when I got started in photography. I got really interested in photography. I started going to school for photography. I started to study the masters of photography. I started to assist photographers. And I was constantly chasing that new camera. I want that next lens. I want that softbox. I want these kind of lights. I want this. I want that. And then the digital revolution came, and now I need the digital camera, and I need the laptop, and I need the Photoshop, and I need the this, and I need the that, and I need the stuff. And what happened is I was chasing photography for all of the gear, all of the stuff. And I love gear. I love getting excited about new cameras. I love getting excited about new lights, but I was not becoming a better photographer. I was becoming a broke photographer. I was becoming a photographer in debt. I was becoming a photographer who owned a lot of equipment, but I wasn't a very good photographer because I was more interested in the equipment and the gear and the stuff and the things than the actual taking pictures. And that all came down. My life fell apart. My wife walked out on me. I was a single dad overnight. I lost my job. And I had to sell all of that equipment to pay the bills for a while. And after 2 years, I was no longer a photographer. And I got a chance to come back to photography to second shoot weddings with a friend of mine. And he bought me a Nikon D100, and I had a 35 millimeter f2 lens, and I had a beat up old Vivitar 285 flash. Anyone remember the Vivitar 285? Yes, sir, with the gray beard. You remember Edward Weston. Y'all were friends, right? No, kidding. But you remember the 285. It was a workhorse of a flash. It was great. And it was like $100 tops to buy one. But that's all I had, and that's what I got started with. And I decided then that I was not going to go into debt, that I was going to make the most of my equipment. And I was not going to allow photography to master me. I was going to master the photography. And I did it slow and meticulous over time. And so that's where I like to start off all of these workshops. I don't want you leaving this workshop today thinking, wow, I need to go buy $100,000 worth of equipment to be a good photographer. That's not true. You just need some simple equipment, learn what it can do, and then grow over time. All right? So at the end of the day, we're talking about lighting. Light is light. Light is light. So if that light is a flash, great. If it's a strobe, fantastic. If it's a continuous light source, like these up here on this big lighting truss, fantastic. You can use lights. If it's the sun, if it's a window, light is light. Your job as a photographer is to capture that light, expose for that light. You might need to modify or manipulate that light, and there's tools for you to do that. But light is light. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that this brand is better, this brand is worse. There's good brands, bad brands, but someone at lunch today was asking me my opinions on light brands. This one's good, that one's good, this one's good too. What's your budget? You know, you can spend a little bit of money and get a great light. You can spend a lot of money, get a great light. But light is light. It's far more what you do with it than what you own, okay? So available light versus lit. I love available light. A lot of people think that since I teach ONELIGHT, that I teach lighting, that I only light things, that I never use available light or natural light. It's not true. Half of my portfolio is natural light. Half of it is lit. So I use whichever one I need. But there are reasons that I will go to available light or to strobe or flash based on what is happening in front of me. So in this picture here, and excuse, it's a little stretched out. We quite aren't sure why my laptop is stretching things a bit. So it's a little stretch, but we'll get all the information the same. So I was really like drawn to this rim light on her arm that was coming from the sun, bouncing off of a window. But by the time I exposed properly for her face, a little darker complexion, she's wearing an all-white shirt, those highlights were starting to get blown out. I'm losing all of that detail. All the detail in her shirt is starting to blow out. If you were here for the media launch, I wasn't shooting this medium format, so there's no way I was going to get that recovered. That was not coming back. So what I wanted was that nice, warm little rim light that my eye saw. What our eyes see and what our cameras can capture are two different things. We call it dynamic range. Our eyes can see detail in the brightest highlights and the darkest shadows. Our cameras, like if we see this much, our cameras see this much, all right? So what I needed to do was compress those highlights and shadows. So I underexposed this ambient light, which would have made her a silhouette, but these highlight details were retained. So then she was too dark. So if there's something that's too dark, you add light to it, right? My subject is too dark, but those highlights look good, but her face is too dark, so you have to add light back to it. So flash versus strobe. Today as I'm talking, you might hear me say flash, or you might hear me say strobe. If I say flash, then I'm just talking about a small little hot shoe flash, something like this. Runs on 4 AA batteries, fits in your bag, can go on the hot shoe of your camera. If I say strobe, then I'm talking about a larger light. A Profoto, an Ellen Chrome, Broncolor, Alien B, Photix, Godox. Something larger, needs a bigger battery, needs to be plugged into the mains on the wall, something like that. At the end of the day, for me, the way I think of it, flash and a strobe are the same thing. They have some different features. They do a few different things. But a flash is a little bit of light, and a strobe is a lot of light. So it all depends on what you need. If you just need a little bit of light, you can make it happen with a flash. If you need a lot of light, you're probably going to need a strobe. You know, and you can kind of do some things a strobe can do with a little flash, and you can do things that a flash can do with a strobe. So there's some middle ground where they can meet. But at the end of the day, they just make light. Pop. They make light. A little bit of it, a lot of it. It's all just light. That's all it's making. If you take a flash and you put it in a medium softbox, it's going to make medium softbox light. If you put a strobe in the same medium softbox, it's going to make medium softbox light. So it doesn't really matter. It just depends on how much light you need. So the thing about flash and strobe that is so intimidating to get started with is exposing properly for it. It happens in a fraction of a second. The meter inside of your camera can't read it, so it doesn't know what's happening. It can't tell you, oh, that flash is 5.6. Most of us these days aren't walking around with a flash meter. I own one. If you walked into my studio in Atlanta and said, hey, Zach, show me your flash meter, I'd be like, hold on a second. Let me find it. I don't know where it is. It's been probably a year and a half since I've used it, kind of a thing. Some people say, oh, you still have to use a flash meter in this day and age, and it's so important and all that. And honestly, in digital, you can take a picture, look at the back of your camera, look at your histogram, and you can make, you know, an educated guess on what you need to do with your exposure. In the film days, you had to have a flash meter. These days, I think of it as optional equipment. But there's 5 things to exposure control that you have to keep in mind. And we're going to walk through these 5 things fairly quickly. There's tons of free YouTube videos on exposure control for flash so that you can kind of go and watch them again and again until it gets into your brain. But these 5 things are your aperture, or f-stop, f2, 2.8, 4, 5, 6, 8, 11, 16, etc. Shutter speed, flash power, your flash to subject distance, how far or close your flash is to your subject, and finally your ISO, all right? So we'll kind of walk through these things, and then when I start to demo, I'll set up my lights, we'll get the camera going, we'll get it all tethered up, we'll hope and pray that it all works, because it's technology, and it's me, and I'm on stage, so it should probably all just stop working immediately. But I will walk through all of these things as I'm finding my exposure. We'll get a subject in front of our camera, we'll get a light turned on, we'll turn it on to some basic setting, we'll take a picture, and I'll show you how I walk through finding my exposure in the demo part. But number 1 is aperture, or your f-stop. Aperture controls flash exposure, all right? Aperture controls flash exposure. When that flash fires, it flashes for a fraction of a second. You cannot control the time of flash, but you can control the amount of flash. Aperture is amount of light. Shutter speed is time of light. And since you can't control the time of a flash, you can control the amount. So aperture is going to be the first thing that we look at. Shutter speed is still important. Shutter speed primarily controls your ambient exposure. And what I mean by ambient exposure is the continuous amount of light in your composition that is constantly on. Like these lights. These are the ambient light of the room. They're on, they're still on, they're still on, right? They're constant. So I can control this with time. Strobes I will have to control with amount, aperture. Aperture controls flash exposure. Shutter speed controls ambient. If we look at these 5 pictures here, we see the ambient light going from darker to lighter. I'm controlling that with my shutter speed. My aperture stays the same. My ISO stays the same. I just simply changed my my shutter speed so that my background can go darker or lighter. And I think of shutter speed as seasoning. You shutter speed to taste, right? You want it a little spicier, you want it less spicy. I want my flash exposure to be dead on, but I can make the background a little darker, or I can make the background a little brighter. We have one limit, and that is our sync speed. We aren't going to be doing any high-speed sync or hypersyncing or any of that today. We're going to be in all manual flash settings. There's going to be no TTL, because TTL means totally, totally lame. So we're all manual. Joe McNally always loves that joke, because he's like the TTL master. So you have one limit, and that's our sync speed. That's going to be the fastest shutter speed we can use with off-camera flash. So let's walk through a full-frame example of this. Set up this band. It's later in the evening, like the sun is just about to go down, some cloudy skies. This is difficult to do, like if we walked outside right now in the blazing Bombay sun with a little hot shoe flash and tried to make it look like that, we'd have some difficulty, because it's a little bit of light. We need a lot of light to go overpower that sun. But come to about 7:30 tonight, as the sun goes down, the sky starts to get darker, this is a much easier thing to accomplish. So we're going to start off at f4, 2/50th of a second, ISO 100. My aperture will stay constant. My ISO will stay constant, but I will change my shutter speed. My sync speed is 2/50th for this camera that I was using for this shot. And we'll start to slow it down. And you'll see that the band stays the same exposure, but the ambient light of the sky starts to get brighter. So we're at 1/25th, 60th, 30th. We're going to start to hit a range here where the ambient light and the flash are going to start to mix, meaning the ratio of flash to ambient is going to start to get to be about 1:1. Here, we're clearly overpowering ambient light. Ambient light is underexposed. Flash is properly exposed. But you can slow it down so much, here we are at 15th, that you start to have a hard time telling which is which. What part of this exposure is ambient? What part of this exposure is lit? And then it can get so slow that it's just kind of messy. So you can't take it too far, right? But you'll see that immediately on the back of your camera. You'll see it like, oh, I think I took my shutter speed a little too much. I'm going to speed it back up. Now, some of you may like it right about there. Some of you might like it there. You like it darker and you like it moodier. You know, some of you are happier people and you own cats and dogs and you just, life is better for you. So you like it a little brighter, right? Like shutter speed, it's seasoning. You want a little more salt? You want a little less salt? It's fine. Whatever you want to do, it's up to you. Sometimes I like that picture, but my client wants that picture. And I can give them both options. And I can do it in camera. I don't have to go in Photoshop, make a mask, take the sky darker, brighter. I can just shoot a series of it and choose later. So, flash power. When we turn on a strobe or we turn on a flash, it's going to be at a power setting. We have full power, half power, quarter power, eighth power, 16th power, so on. Flash power is basically the dimmer switch. Is there someone on the lights, these lights, can these dim slowly down? Just dim them, right? And now bring them back up. There we go. That's flash power. I need less, I need more. More is going to be whatever it can produce, full power. That will be dependent on the light that you buy. This full power, That's all it can make. It's full. It's the brightest it can possibly be. And then you start to go down in increments from there. And this is the basic equation. Every time you cut power in half, you lose 1 stop of light. Every time you double your power, you gain 1 stop of light. So if you're at half power and you go to quarter power, then you've brought your light down 1 stop. All right? It happens every time. Mathematically, it works out. So let's just run through a hypothetical situation. Totally hypothetical. These aren't real, actual, real-world exposures. They could be, but they might not be too, depending on many things. So let me build this out. Let's say that we're at half power, all right? I come over here to this light. I turn it on. I get it to half power. I have a subject sitting here. I point my light at the subject. I start to take a couple test shots, taking my test shots, and I say, okay, check it out. Half power, f11, that looks really good. That's proper exposure. If I go over to that light and I take it from half power to quarter, my exposure will now be f8. If I push it to full power, my proper exposure will be f16. F8 to f11 is 1 stop of light. Quarter to half, 1 stop of light. All right? These are reciprocals. Reciprocals are the same exposure value, but at different settings. You know, sometimes people will say, oh, I love that picture. What were your settings? What were your settings? Well, they could have been 2.8 at 60th, or it could have been f4 at 30th. It could have been 2.8 at 60th at 100 ISO. It could have been 2.8 at 125th at ISO 200. Those would all be the same exposure values, right? Just knowing the settings to a photo is not going to help you recreate that kind of photo, right? What I want you to say is, don't go to a photographer and say, I love this photo, what were your settings? Stop saying that. All that's saying is, hi, I'm an amateur, I don't know what I'm talking about. You don't want to be that way. What you want to think, you look at that picture and go, wow, I love that picture. What were you thinking about when you made that photo? What was your inspiration to make that photo? Because, see, I used to assist photographers, and I remember I used to have this cheap, like, 3-foot by 2-foot softbox. And I was assisting a photographer once, and he had the same size softbox, but a different brand. And he set up the shoot, and we did the shoot, and then I saw the pictures later. And when I saw the pictures that he made, I said, wow, I need to get that softbox. I already had basically the same softbox. It was just a knockoff generic version of it that cost me like $200 less than what he paid for his. He could have made the same photo with my softbox. My brain wanted his softbox. What my brain needed was his eyes. What my brain needed was his thought process. How did you see that photo? How did you conceive that composition? Of all the pictures that could be made in this room, why did you pick that corner? How did you know that that was going to be the cool shot? Because I probably would have done it over here and it would have sucked. But you knew to do it over there and it was great. What were you thinking? Those are the questions to ask a photographer. You can look at a picture and go, okay, it was shallow depth of field, so it was a big wide open aperture. And you can figure it out from there, right? The settings don't always mean so much. So let's say a hypothetical situation. And welcome to my workshop. This is what's going to happen all day. Wait till we start shooting. It's all going to go to hell as soon as I pull the camera up. But you'll feel better about yourself when you see me sweat. You say, well, that guy's been doing it for 20 years and he can't pull it together. That gives me a lot of confidence. So let's say we've got a subject sitting over here. I come over here to my flash, my strobe. I turn it on, and I say, okay, I'm going to start it at, I don't know, quarter power. Let's see what happens. I take a picture at quarter power. I make some adjustments to my aperture because aperture controls flash exposure, right? And I find that I'm at 5.6. 5.6, quarter power, click, look at the picture. Picture looks good. All right, great. But you, as a photographer, decide you want something else. You want to shoot this portrait at 2.8 because you want a shallower depth of field. Right now you're at 5.6. Okay, I'm at 5.6 at quarter power, but I want to be at 2.8. So that's f4 2.8. I want to open my lens 2 stops. I'm at quarter power on my light. So let me bring it down 1, 2 stops. I can now shoot at 16th power at 2.8. Boom, 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 click, and you're there. All right? It seems overwhelming and intimidating. At first, all these numbers, fractions, and decimals, they don't add up. But if you slow down, commit these numbers to memory, you say, okay, I'm at 5.6, I want to be at 2.8, I want a shallow depth of field, 4, 2.8, that's 2 stops. I'm at quarter power, I need to be at 16th. 16th power, 2.8, click, and you're there. All right? Typically what I will do in that kind of situation is if I already know I want to shoot this portrait at 2.8 or at some aperture I've decided to shoot at, I set my camera to that aperture and then I dial my power up and down as needed until it looks good at that aperture. All right? So I'm going to give you a little bit of a brain challenge. Back in photography school, we had to do these kind of challenges for tests and things. But I want to kind of show you really where the flash and the strobe depart from each other, all right? So let's say you're shooting this big, bright sky, all right? You got this big, bright sky, and you got this dude who's jumping, and you want to photograph him, and he's like jumping in front of the sun, all right? So the sun is right here, bright blue sky. Bright blue sky is what? Ambient. Bright blue sky is ambient exposure, controlled by shutter speed. Good. All right. So bright sky is controlled by shutter speed. You have a limit, and it depends on your camera. But for this camera, my limit was 250th of a second. 250th of a second, that's the limit I can go to. And then you run out of shutter speed. So the only other way to then control that ambient light is now with your aperture. You've run out of shutter speed, but you can keep stopping down your aperture to cut the amount of light from that sky, right? But now you're at ISO 100, and the sky looks great. Looks awesome. You go set your little flash, like hot shoe flash, to full power, right? You're asking 4 AA batteries to go up against the sun. It is a David and Goliath kind of like showdown. 4 AA batteries and the sun. Nuclear fission. It's fission, right? It's not fusion, it's fission in the sun. It takes like 8 AA batteries to get on fission. So, set your flash to full power. You're using a large softbox. You put it up in a big softbox. You want this nice soft light. And the best you get is 5.6. Let's say I went, I found my old flash meter, blew the dust off of it, stuck a new battery in it, took a meter reading, and the best I'm getting out of that full power flash out of a big softbox is 5.6. I need to be at f16. Aperture controls flash exposure. If I'm shooting at f16 and all I'm getting out of that light is 5.6, then I need more light. Some people might say, well, Zach, you could get a neutral density filter. pop that on your lens, 3-stop neutral density, you'll bring the light down 3 stops, right? 5, 6 to 8, 11, 16. I need 3 stops of light. That's all. 3 stops of light. How hard could it be? Well, if I bring the sky down 3 stops with neutral density, I'm also bringing my flash down 3 stops with neutral density, right? Some people might say, well, if you increase your ISO, then maybe you can bring your aperture down. True, but then my shutter speed will need to continue to rise, and I'm still going to need 3 more stops. Basically, what I need here is I need the flash to hit my subject at f16, which is also the sky. They need to match. And 3 stops of light can cost a lot of money, all right? So we have 1 flash, full power, and we get 5, 6. We double flash power, we gain 1 stop of light. So what we're going to do is we're going to throw 2 flashes, both at full power, into our softbox. But we are only at f8 at this point. We have to double our power again. So now we're buying 4 flashes, all of them full power, all somehow mounting into a softbox. There is one thing that I've seen that will mount 4 lights into a softbox. But we're still only at f11. We still need one more stinking stop of light. Right? We have to double our flash power. So we now need 8 hot shoe flashes, all at full power. You're just opening up the softbox and like shoveling flashes into it. Like just, I'm giving it all she's got, Captain. Like, I don't know. That is a lot of money, right? If this is top of the line Nikon or Canon flash, and they're like 500 US each, right? There's 5. It's like me at a Joe McNally event. I get to teach alongside Joe McNally every now and then, and he will pull out all his speed lights, and I just start going, $500, $1,000, $1,500, $2,000, like, and hey, we're up to $8,000 in lights over here, right? I just bust his chops. He's such a great guy. Anyone been to a Joe McNally event? Yes. Yes. He's so fantastic. So, you buy lights for power, not just for options. You can buy some lights that are like, oh, and these are Bluetooth controlled, and you can bring them down with an app, and blah, 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 blah. And you pay $1,500 for that. Like, I don't need an app for my light. I can walk over to it and change it. And, I mean, look at me. I need the exercise, right? So I can walk over all the way over to my light and adjust it. I don't need an app, you know, but I'm also not like hanging them from rafters and stuff like that either. So, all right, this part can suck. Flash to subject distance. Ugh. I did not get into photography for this. I got into photography actually to avoid this, right? I am not good with the maths. And I promised myself I would not make any stereotypical jokes about how good Indians are with engineering, right? Because half of the room here is like, I learned that when I was 3 years old. Like, that's easy. I look at that and I just like, I don't know what it means. Okay. It's the inverse square law. And inverse square law is this weird thing that I don't quite understand all the math of it. I don't calculate it, but I use it every day. Like, there's a great quote, I don't know how electricity works, but I use it every day, right? There's some electrons and stuff, and there's something positive and something negative, and you shouldn't put your tongue in it. But if I take this cord and I plug it in this wall, then my laptop will work. I know electricity. Like, that's what I need to know, and that's how I use it. That's the same with inverse square law. An equation that relates the intensity of a light source to the illumination it produces at a given distance. Light diminishes over distance. So light falls off. Light diminishes over distance in accordance with the inverse square law, which states doubling the flash to subject distance reduces the light falling on the subject to 1/4. All right? What does that mean? Why should we even care? Let's say we have a subject over here. Here's our subject. All right? I'm the subject. And let's say this light is about 1 meter away from me. All right? Then we take that light and we move it to 2 meters. We have doubled the distance from the subject to the light. My brain says, well, we lost half the light when we double distance. But actually, you lose 75% of the light when you double distance. So what does that mean? The main thing that means is if you set up a shot, you've taken your test shots, you're shooting, you're taking pictures, everything looks good, and your subject steps away from the light, or you move the light away from them or get it closer, or they're like here and they're posing and they're doing all their stuff, and then they like step over here closer to the light, your exposure changed. As soon as distance changed, exposure changed. So when distance changes, stop, reevaluate your exposure, make an adjustment, and begin shooting again. You can get all focused in on shooting and forget that somebody walked closer to the light or walked further from the light, and then you're going back looking at your pictures and they're like, fine, 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 darker, darker, darker. What happened? Oh, they walked away from the light. All right? So light falls off drastically close to the light source, then gradually further from the light source. How many like wedding event photographers do we have in the room? Okay, good number of you. All right. So this is where inverse square law, what this matters to you. Let's say, hold on, armpit microphone. There we go. Let's get this up a little higher. Hypothetical situation. Let's say this is the dance floor at a wedding reception, and you want to do some cool, snazzy, dramatic, off-camera lighting for the first dance, all right? So bride and groom come out, first dance. You've got this, like this is the dance floor, and you got your off-camera light set up right at the edge of it, or you have an assistant kind of holding it or something like that. And it starts firing off, and they're over here. What happens is light falls off drastically close to the light source, then gradually further from the light source. So think about doubling distance. And excuse me for falling back into standard measurements, but let's say we're 1 foot away from the light, and we double distance to 2 feet. My light just changed 75% in that distance. We're at 2 feet. My next doubling point is 4 feet. At 4 feet, somewhere, 75% drop. 8 feet is the next doubling point. 16 feet is the next doubling point. So we're at some point where in 16 feet of distance, our light has fallen basically by 2 stops within 16 feet. But when we're close to the light, and we went from 1 foot to 2 foot, we lost 2 stops of light in 1 foot of space. 16 feet of space over there, 1 foot of space over here. What does that mean? First dance, your couple is at F11 here. They swirl around to F8. They're swirling even more. Now they're at 5-6. He gives her a dip. Her head's at F4, her feet are at F8, right? You're going to have this like massive change of exposure from there to here because you're close to the light. Or mom and dad join them. Mom and dad are over here dancing in F11. Bride and groom are over there dancing in 5-6. Right? They're in 5-6, F8, F11. Mom and dad are bright. Groom are darker and bride. So what you want to do is you say, okay, like the gentleman back here on the slider camera, maybe I'm going to stick my camera, or my light off over there. Let all of that falling off drastic stuff happen over there. So by the time it hits the dance floor from here to there, to there, to there, to there, it's all within about a stop of light. So they can be here, mom and dad can be there, bride and groom here, and they're all inside of a stop because you took your light further back. When your light is right up on top of the dance floor, inverse square law, maths begin to happen, and maths are a pain in the ass. All right? It's a law. It's the inverse square law. You can't change it, right? Can't do much about it. Here's where I use it a lot, is changing my background. So this is a white seamless background, like that, exactly like that, a 9-foot white seamless background. White seamless background, that is a white seamless background. That is the same exact background. He is standing in the same exact spot. So he's standing about here in relationship to the background. So for the darker background, I bring the light in really close to him. So the light hits him and then falls off, maybe falls off 3 stops to the background, and that background goes darker. If your background is 3 stops darker than your subject, then it will go dark. Then he's standing right here, and I take that same softbox and I move it to maybe here, kind of bringing it away. It was a fairly large softbox. So the light falls off, hits the subject, and then gradually falls off to the background, maybe by a stop. So then my white background goes light gray. And that is where I use inverse square law the most. I can walk into a situation, I can see a white wall, and I can do anything with that white wall. I can make it pure white if I need to. I can make it light gray. I can make it medium gray. I can make it absolutely black if I have to. By how I use my modifiers and inverse square law, I can keep light from hitting that background and make it dark. And that gives me options. As a photographer, you want options. You want to be able to walk into a situation and make things happen. And a lot of times, you have to make something happen out of nothing. So you walk in a room, there's a plain white wall, and you say, aha, I can shoot on that plain white wall, and I can go light, I can go dark, I can go anywhere in between. I can make something happen on that. All right, the last thing for exposure control. So wake up, wake up. Last thing. We'll get out of all this boring technical stuff. ISO. Increasing ISO increases sensitivity to light, both flash and ambient together, not independently from each other. ISO is the tide that raises and lowers all ships. All right? So as you change ISO, you are changing your sensitivity to flash and ambient together, bringing it up, taking it down. As ISO goes up, flash power can go down. Lower flash power equals less battery consumption. I find with the way that I shoot, if I can keep my hot shoe flashes at around a quarter power, or at least under half power, a set of batteries will last me for the whole shoot. As soon as I'm half power and over, I'm going to go through batteries very quickly. So I look at, okay, how many batteries do I have for the day? I've got to get through this many shots for the shoot. I need to be kind of conservative on my flash power. So instead of shooting at ISO 100 at half power, I'm going to switch this to ISO 200, because then I'll get to shoot at quarter power, and my batteries will last me longer through the day, is one thing that goes through my mind. As ISO goes up, shutter speeds can get faster. I think of this as when I'm running out of ambient light, when I'm in a darker, low light situation, and I still need to pull in some amount of ambient light, but I don't want to be shooting at like a 2-second shutter speed to do so. I think, hey, okay, I can bring ISO up, I can bring flash power down, and I'll be able to have a faster shutter speed for this low light situation. All right, so that's typically, ISO is typically the last thing I think about. When I step into a shoot and I'm trying to figure out my shot, I'm thinking about my aperture. All right, what's my aperture going to be? Am I shooting a group shot? Am I shooting just a single shot of one person? Do I want a really shallow depth of field, or do I need to see a little bit into the environment, so I need to be in a medium range aperture? Okay, so I kind of get an idea for an aperture. Then I look at my ambient light. Is it really super bright and I need to bring it under control, or is it kind of average and 60th of a second-ish something will probably take care of it? Okay, I'll figure that out. So I figure out my aperture and my flash power first. Once I get that dialed in, then I look at my shutter speed. I'm usually at my lowest ISO to start with, 100, somewhere in there, and then make a change as needed. But aperture and flash power, followed closely by shutter speed, are the importance they go through in my brain. Okay, that's it for exposure control. We'll talk a little bit more about it as we start to demo this stuff. I need to grab this. Okay, 5:02. I got to keep an eye on my time, or we'll be here until like 9 o'clock tonight. And I have a morning flight I have to catch, so I can't do that. All right, modifiers. Let's talk about modifiers. I like to do that because there are certain things that are sold in the industry you know, those little takeout cups that you put on your hot shoe flash, and they're sold to you as, this is studio quality lighting for on-camera flash. You know, I have heard one such purveyor of those things. Let's watch it again. Okay, I have heard one such purveyor stand on a stage not so different from this, to not so many different people that are here today, and say, you no longer need soft boxes and umbrellas. You can use this little takeout cup on top of your flash. And I'm standing in the back just shaking my head, just sad, because people were lined up to pay $79.99 to buy this thing. And I was like, why did I not think of this first? I could be rich, I could retire, and you could all go shoot really shitty pictures with my Chinese takeout noodle cup. But I have a little more integrity than to do that to people. So I'm going to quickly talk through this, and then we'll talk about it more as we demo, right? Demo is key to putting this all together. We're going to get through this presentation. We're going to take a little chai break, and then we'll come back, and we'll use the rest of our time demoing. So if this is light, light is light, right? A flash is light. Then a lampshade is a modifier, right? If you put a lampshade on your light bulb, it makes it softer, makes a nicer glow in the room. So a lampshade is like a softbox. There are times for straight flash. If I say, okay, you know, I shot this just straight flash. No modifiers, no umbrellas, no softboxes. I didn't bounce it off of anything. I just went straight flash. This is that moment of when it's high noon, bright sun. You need to make the most that you can possibly make out of a hot shoe flash. You're probably just going to go straight flash with it. It's a hard light source. It's not soft, but I'm not against hard light sources. They can be very cool to use. They can be very edgy and contrasty and punchy. I like using hard lights sometimes. And then umbrellas versus softboxes. And y'all, there are so many modifiers in the world, right? There's soft lighters, there's strip boxes, there's beauty dishes, there's this, there's that, there's ring lights. You know, there's all manners of sizes of soft boxes and strips and umbrellas and beauty dishes. There's silver umbrellas and white umbrellas. There's shoot-through umbrellas and reflective umbrellas. There's grids for all of them and grids for none of them, and on and on and on, right? We're going to keep it kind of simple today because it's all basically an umbrella or a softbox or a hard light, basically, when it comes down to it. So, umbrellas. The larger the umbrella, the softer the light. And that's true for anything. The larger the light source, the softer the light's going to be. Okay? The larger the light source, the softer the light is going to be. But there's one more part of that equation. I feel like a televangelist coming down to start interacting with everyone. Okay. So this is a fairly small umbrella, small modifier. All right? It's not very big. It's easy to travel with, though. That's nice. But here's the thing. The larger the light source is in relationship to your subject, the softer the light will be. So, sir, if you're my subject and I bring this in really close to you, it's a soft light source to him. Because in relationship to his size and this, it is large. But if I start to back this out further and further away from him, it is getting smaller in relationship to him, thus getting harder. It's not going to be as soft of a light. If I need to shoot a portrait of him right there, and I need to be here, and I need my light here, and I need it to be soft, then I need this to be larger. The further your light goes, if you still need it to be a soft light, then the larger the modifier needs to get. Let's say you buy a 3-meter wide Octabank. Big, huge, gorgeous, 3 meters. And you bring it in close to your subject. It's massive. It is just window light wherever you need it. I need a window light right here. 3-meter Octa. Big, huge. But it's also beautiful over here because it's so big, right? So if I'm shooting a group of you, there's 5, 6, 7 of you I need to photograph, and I want the softest light possible, I need my light backed off a bit, but I need it to be a large light source, okay? So, umbrellas versus softboxes. Now, I would never buy a softbox this small, or any smaller than this. This would be the smallest I would get. They call it a beauty dish. And if you brought it in about right there, can you breathe? You all right? No, you're fine. If I brought it in about there, it'd be fine. As soon as it comes back here, not so much, all right? It's a nice beauty dish for like maybe kittens or squirrels, you know, because it'd be large in relationship. But if I'm trying to shoot a portrait, and I see a lot of people struggle as they get started with lighting, they get this, and they put it here from their subject. And it's like, it's not that great. Yes, you can shoot a picture here. Yes, it will be softer than just a hard, straight flash. But it won't look that nice. And the rule of thumb is your working distance is twice the diagonal of your modifier. So there's 1, 2. So that would be maybe the largest distance for this size modifier I would use this from. If you ever wonder where my softboxes or umbrellas are placed, look at my picture, and then about that far outside of the frame is where my light is. I bring it in as close as I can for the composition I'm trying to make. So umbrellas are nice. They're inexpensive. You can get them fairly cheap. They are the Swiss Army knife of modifiers, meaning they don't do one thing particularly awesome, but they do several things pretty great, right? You can do shoot-through versus reflective. I'll talk about that later probably. They're great for solo shoots, and they're best for groups. If you've got a group of more than 5 people, you can cover 20 people with a big umbrella. I typically buy 60-inch umbrellas, and if I have to like shoot the whole first 2 rows of you, I would take a 60-inch umbrella, I'd throw it straight up over my head, and I'd wash all of you with light and could get that done. Soft boxes, they're kind of like window light on a stick. They're more expensive than umbrellas, so you're going to be spending a little more money. But this is the big thing with softboxes compared to umbrellas. An umbrella is just a wash of light. It's not very directional. If I point it this way or that way or this way or that way, it's all just like a wash. I need to wash this with light. Umbrella. But if you say, okay, I'm going to sit my subject here. I want to put a nice soft light source on them, but I need to minimize the light hitting the environment or the background, then you go to a softbox. A softbox is a beautiful soft light that's more directional. You have a little more control of where you put that light. Because lighting is what you light and what you don't light. Half of what I do with lighting is making sure that light doesn't hit something. I don't want light to hit that wall. I don't want too much light hitting the floor. So I've got to light my subject but not the ground. I need to light my subject but it's spilling on the ceiling, so now I need to cut the light off of the ceiling. Too much light is hitting the background, so I got to cut that now so it doesn't hit the background. Not enough light is hitting the background, so now I need to light the subject and the background. Still not enough light. Well, now I need another light just for the background and a light for the subject, right? So, if you're a location photographer shooting outside, softboxes handle the wind a little bit better than an umbrella. An umbrella is just going to like blow over. You can sneeze on it and it's just going to go, right? I think of umbrellas as disposable modifiers. They should sell them by the 6-pack because it's just going to go. But here's the deal. I buy these cheap umbrellas. In the States, they cost $30 US. And then the really nice umbrellas cost about $60 US. And the big difference between a $30 umbrella and a $60 umbrella is you standing on location watching $30 blow over or watching $60 blow over. It's up to you. You can lose $30 or you can lose $60. But side-by-side shooting comparison, they look the same, all right? Grids. Grids are cool. You can put grids on a straight flash. You can put grids on a softbox. You can't put grids on an umbrella. They don't make grids for umbrellas that I have seen. But unfortunately, we don't have any grids today. But we'll still kind of work it out. Grids, they restrict the light from flash to a tight circle. The smaller the degree, the smaller the circle of light. It puts light only where you want it. Only right where you want it. Is what a grid does. I'm also, gentlemen, is my camera bag still over there? Could we bring that up real quick? Everyone, Zach's camera bag. Zach's camera bag to the stage. Zach's camera bag is a nice black airport think tank security. Now, I need to pull one modifier out that I forgot to pull out before. And it's this guy. Okay. So, grids bring the drama. So, this is a big wide shot. I have a grid on my light, and you can see this circle of light that it's creating right here. Instead, it would have been putting light like this, but the grid keeps it kind of confined. And I like to shoot past the grid. I like to give it that kind of theatrical spotlight sort of look. So I use grids in combination with wide-angle lenses quite a bit. I show the edges of that grid. This shot was taken in my studio, daylight studio, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, full sun outside, way more light than what's on this stage. But I could make a shot like that in camera. And what's cool, what I like to do with lighting is that I'll take a picture, right? Imagine you're sitting in all of this light, right? And there's a white wall. Imagine a white wall behind, and there's all this light, and I go click, I turn the camera around, and this is what you see. You're like, whoa, how'd you do that? Like, I like to be kind of like a magician. And I like my subjects to see that I did it with a camera. Because they're going to go away, they're going to get their pictures later, and they go, wow, he must have done a lot of Photoshop to this because it didn't look anything like that in his studio. So he must have like made it black in Photoshop. Like, I want them to know that I do that with a camera because everybody's a photographer these days, right? You're a photographer, look at this. You're all photographers. And I bet you anything that you're all pretty good photographers, right? I bet I can hand a Canon 5D R2 D2 C3PO to any of you and give you a pretty subject to photograph and send you outside for 10 minutes, and you'd come back with a pretty nice photo. One that the subject would be like, oh, I want to put that on my Instagram, right? Shoot it at 1.8 in the shade, and you're done. You're a photographer, right? If I can come along with the same pretty subject and say, hey, hey, come stand over here, and then I go beep, 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 beep with my lights, and I make something completely different that none of you made. Like, oh yeah, I got all these great pictures, but there was this one photographer. He did something crazy. He had these lights and like something, and they made everything black, and like it was like dark and dramatic. It was cool. It doesn't make me a better photographer than any of you. I swear to God, there are better photographers in this room than me. But it makes me a different photographer. And sometimes that's all I need to be. If you're all apples, I just need to be the orange, right? Everybody's a good apple. I'll be a half sour orange, and that'll make me happy, all right? So sometimes being different is through light. So what I want to encourage you to do is to play with your light. And this is something that 20 years into this, I'm finally starting to play. I've always been very technical. I should have been German. 1, 2, 3, 4. Ich bin Ausländer, sprechen Sie nicht gut Deutsch. Lighting, right? Blitztag. Like, lighting, this is how you light. This is proper exposure. This is proper white balance. This is how you do it. This is how you use a rim light. This is a hair light. 3 stops this and 2 stops that. That's always been how I think. And I've been into the technical for so long. And what I've not been able to do is to play with it, is to get messy with it. And that's what I'm trying to do now in my life. I have so much left to learn. All right? So I'll play with light. This is kind of what the ambient situation looked like that I was shooting in. I took one flash, put it behind the band. We're inside, indoors, and I shot it from behind them to make something kind of interesting. So that light flare up in the top, that's just a little hot shoe flash. And then I grab a reflector, and I grab some of that light coming from the flash, and I point it back into my scene. I needed to photograph this guy for a magazine article. I typically do not like to photograph musicians with their instruments because I feel it's kind of cliche. I'm about to embarrass 63% of you. It's the same reason why you won't find any pictures of me holding a camera, right? Hi, I'm Zach. I'm a photographer. Here's my camera to prove it. And I see many of you going on Facebook. Delete, 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 delete. It's fine. It's fine. We've all done it. But this guy is the new leader of the Count Basie Orchestra. That trumpet has this like historical importance to the story. So they were like, we need to see the trumpet. We need the trumpet as part of the story. It's as much of the story as he is. So I just took a little hot shoe flash, and once you have it off your camera, you can just put it on the floor and fire it up at your subject, right? I mean, it's not your typical lighting setup, firing a light up at your subject, but I wanted to play with the shadow. And I took all sorts of really nice traditional pictures of him and his horn and, you know, and all of that with softbox light and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Like, I took all those pictures, but those were kind of boring to me. I'm like, these are your typical, hi, I play the trumpet pictures, right? Hi, I'm a photographer picture, right? I wanted something different. So I decided to play around with the shadow. Here's where I is a good example of doing something different. We were out shooting a promo piece. She's a musician. And she said she wanted more natural environments instead of urban environments, but we were downtown Atlanta, so it's kind of hard to find a natural environment in an urban center. But I found this big wall of ivy. It's called kudzu. It came from the Japanese, thank you very much. And now it's an invasive plant in the South. Thank you very much. So I thought what I would do is walk her over to this big wall of ivy, pop a light into a soft box, something, take a picture, da-da-da-da-da-da. But when I walked up to it, I realized you could part the ivy and stick your head back in there, and there was a big white retaining wall, and this ivy was growing over it. So normally, most of the time, I use my light to light the subject, and I use shutter speed, ambient, to control the background. Well, I flipped it. I used my flash to light the background, and I used my ambient to light the subject, and it looked like that. I made that whole thing glow with a flash. And this is one of those like magician moments. I turn that camera around, and my subject looks at the back of my camera, and she like this. How do you do that? You know, just light, flash, stuff, aperture. Well, actually, it's aperture controls flash exposure, and there's a flash behind there, and ambient controls, or shutter speed controls ambient light, so I'm controlling your blah, 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 blah. No, you know, I know how to use light. You know how many friends she has that has a DSLR? All of them, right? Every friend she has a DSLR or an iPhone X with portrait mode or whatever, right? And they all take good pictures. They all take fine pictures. But that top-of-the-line DSLR won't throw a flash back in some kudzu into some ivy. It doesn't know, hey, let's change the lighting situation here. Let's make something happen. And it's all with like little hot shoe flashes, that is. That's one hot shoe flash, like at full power, behind a bunch of ivy. So things you can control with lighting, we're going to go through this. We're going to take a break, and we'll come back to demos. So just everyone knows, tech-wise, we'll need the computer moved over, and we'll need that pulled up. Y'all know what to do, so that's going to happen. What you control with lighting, the quality, how soft the light is or how hard the light is. And remember, soft light is not better than hard light. It could be better in these situations, but hard light could be a better light for other situations. It all depends. You control the direction of the light, and this is something I'm playing around with now more, is the color of the light. You can gel the light. You can just simply play around with the color of the light in your white balance. I'll show you coming up. So this was a magazine assignment I had to do. And I had to show two different sides of this musician. He's a classically trained violinist, and he travels the world with a band, and it's a rock band. And what he does is at the beginning of his shows, it starts out with just him on stage and his violin. And it's this very soft and very melancholy, dramatic music that's pretty depressing, and it's awesome. I love it, right? Sad, depressing violin music. We all love that. But he starts his show off like that, and he takes you on this emotional roller coaster. So as the show progresses, one by one, another musician will join him on stage and start adding to the music. By the end of the show, it's like a rave. It is like high energy dance music. Everyone in the audience is dancing. He's jumping around on stage. The whole band is going crazy. It's just like going mad, crazy music. So what I had to do was illustrate these two sides of him. And again, typical editorial job, didn't have very much time to do it. This background is this background, right? That white wall, same white wall. So what I did for this is I used some strip softboxes like this. I used 2 strips for that first shot on the left. I had 1 strip box kind of right over here, lighting the front of him and his violin. And then I had another strip at a lower power back here to give me this little bit of rim light so that he didn't just bleed completely off into black here. Then, once we had that done, I had him change out of his black clothes, get into his white clothes. I just had him stand closer to the wall. I took a 60-inch umbrella. I stuck it straight up over my head. And I shot a series of pictures of him jumping and laughing and this is the beginning of his show. That is him at the end of his show. And that's how I had to illustrate it. You can play with the color of light. All right, I learned a lot of photography from filmmakers and filmmaking technique. And one thing that they play with a lot is the color. And it's simply just the white balance. You don't even have to gel. So if I white balance this warm, there's a strobe on the front porch of this house coming into one window, and there's a strobe in the back in the driveway coming through the kitchen. And this was shot at like 10 o'clock at night. So if I warm it up, it's going to give the viewer the feeling of morning or daytime. If I simply cool it down, it gives you that feeling of like evening or night. And that's a trick that filmmakers have used for years. If you ever go back and say watch an old Western, some of the first color Westerns that were shot, and the cowboys are riding through the trees at night, and you see the moon going through the trees and everything's really dark and blue. That was all shot during the day. But it was shot with tungsten film. And they underexposed it, so the sun seemed like the moon, and the blue felt like night, and we just read it as, oh, it's nighttime, right? So you can just simply change the time of day with a little color play of your light. Just white balance. You can gel it, you can do whatever. Typically, I try to get everything color correct. Then I accidentally took a white balance off of the carpet instead of something else I was trying to color pick to white balance, and it totally went haywire with the color. This screen is more haywire than that screen and far more haywire than my monitor. But what happened is I was trying to use the eyedropper tool to get a white balance somewhere up in here. And I did. And I forgot in Capture One to change it back to the pointer tool. And I was still on the white balance eyedropper. And I ended up eyedropping somewhere off of this green carpet. And it threw all the, you never, ever take a white balance off a green carpet like this, right? Oh, let me white balance off of that. That'll be perfect, right? It's going to look horrible, but there was something about it. It doesn't quite relate on this screen, but there was something about it. It was like, oh, ooh, I kind of like that. It just gave it this seedier, more depressing kind of feel to it. This is personal work. It's not client work. And I just sort of liked it. And now I go white balance off of everything in a picture. Let's see what happens. It's like playing the lottery. Ding, hey, that worked. That's cool. I like to play around with light, so I'll throw a light behind a subject and backlight them. And he was sitting in a very small room. He's got a small apartment, so that light was still hitting the walls and the ceiling and things like that. So you could still get some detail in the shadow because it's bouncing around. And then I asked his wife if she had a small makeup mirror One of the coolest lessons I've ever learned from Joe McNally is that a mirror will reflect any shape that it is. If you have a square mirror, it'll reflect a square. If you have a round mirror, it'll reflect round. If you have a star-shaped mirror, it'll reflect a star. Just like pop a light into a mirror, and that shape is going to go somewhere into your picture. And it's going to be like a very focused shape. So I like to play with mirrors ever since learning that. So I asked his wife, I was like, do you have a little small, like, little makeup mirror? Like something she goes digs in her bag, and she's like this, like perfect. So I had his wife hold that, and so the flash, backlights him, and then hits that mirror and comes back and lights his face. It's just a makeup mirror. That's all it is. This was a fun one. A friend of mine posted, I might have a problem. I've bought 25 chairs in the past month, not counting love seats and ottomans. This is my friend TJ. That was posted at 8:55 that morning. You can see on top there. I called TJ up. He lived right down the road from me. I was like, hey, what are you doing? He's like, well, obviously, I'm trying to get rid of some chairs. I was like, not yet. Can I come over and take a portrait of you? Like, I'm into this, like, personal portrait project right now where I just photograph, like, friends or just people off of social media, no models, no actors, no musicians, just, like, standard, normal, regular, old, run-of-the-mill people. And he's like, yeah, sure, come on over. So I didn't have a lot of time. I grabbed this one light that I have, and it's a video light. And I bought it used for $25. $25 1K light. Pretty good deal, right? It's old. All it has is some barn doors. But I love this light, and I use it quite a bit. And I show this to show that light is light. Hot shoe flash, strobe, continuous light, whatever. Light is light. So I go over to TJ's house. I start walking around his house, start trying to find my shot. And I decide that what I'm going to do is put that light outside on the front porch, bringing it in through the window. Gives me some play of shadow and light on the wall. Then we start to get these chairs coming in. I brought some old rope so we could kind of like tie them together. And he was still trying to sell some of these chairs, so we couldn't like destroy them. We had to take care of them. So we start building that, and then I kind of tweak my light, and that's the final shot. And that's from camera, aside from a little white balance, a little contrast, and maybe a hair of vignette. And now for my next masterpiece. I call it Lady in the Tub. No, it's, it doesn't need applause, but thank you. But it's a $25 video light. Oh, and a smoke machine. Psh. I like to add a little smoke every now and then. And no matter how much room you give me to shoot, this is how I will end up somewhere. I will end up in a corner under a table, and that's going to be where I'm going to shoot. Same thing, $25 video light and a garden hose and a cheap smoke machine that I bought after Halloween. After Halloween, all the weird stuff like dry ice machines and smoke machines, they go on sale for clearance. So I bought a like $30 smoke machine, and I got a water hose, and I got a $25 light, and this is my old front yard. I just moved. My neighbors think I'm weird because I smoked it up. I had my son Caleb on the water hose making it rain. And I shoot this personal work for me. I don't shoot it for my subject. I don't shoot it for Instagram or Facebook or for likes or anything. I shoot it all for me. And I get to shoot whatever I want, whatever the subject will let me shoot. And I shoot it all medium format because I want to make big prints of this at some point. And I shoot it medium format so that I can have that kind of detail. It's crazy amount of detail. Since she was already cold and miserable and wet, I tried one more thing. And it's my personal work comes out of a place of me fighting depression and anxiety. I fight depression and anxiety all the time. And I get to the point where I'm burned out on photography. I don't want to take pictures anymore. I'm sick of it. I'm tired. Plus, I suck. I'm never going to be as good as so-and-so. They're always going to be better than me. I'm never going to get that level of client. Blah, 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 blah. Down I go in flames. And I shoot this personal work to keep me sane, to keep me mentally healthy. But it's me working out how I feel and what I fight against. And I loved this picture because she looks like how I was feeling at that time when I shot this. That she's drowning, but she has to stay alive. I have to stay alive. I still have 2 young kids at home. I got bills to pay. I got things I need to do with my life. I can't just let go. I can't just sit at home and feel sorry for myself. Like, I seek help and I work it out through my camera. And it's this kind of stuff that's important to me. I use this thing called the Mag Beam a lot. It's made by a company called Magmod. Does anyone know for sure if Magmod distributes in India? Yes, they do? All right. Magmod. The thing I use the most are their grids and this thing, the Mag Beam. And the Mag Beam has this gobo system. You can put different patterns and shapes into it. It has a Fresnel lens, and you can focus or unfocus the lens with this thing. I'll demo it coming up. But it's a very cool kind of modifier that I use a lot. I use that one little slit a lot, maybe too much. This is the same slit but unfocused. So I have a light, just a hot shoe flash booming over the tub with the Mag Beam on it, unfocused, and it gives me this kind of interesting little play of light. See this light like it's coming out of maybe a window or something like that, this line of light. I'll show you behind the scenes. That's what it was like behind the scenes. So that's a little boom arm, got the light pointing down. You can see how it splits that light into this pattern right here. I would use the laser, but it gets lost. Whoops. It gets lost on this screen. It's hard to see. So that's the Mag Beam. This is using it as more of the strip. And the thing I'm doing right now with lighting, or trying to do, the thing I'm trying to do and not yet accomplishing, very important note, I'm trying. I'm 20 years into this and I'm trying to accomplish something. I get inspired by light that I see. And like this sun's coming through in the morning and it's making this warm, dappled light. And I stop now and I notice it and I say, okay, that warm, dappled light, it's warm in color temperature and it's a hard light source because it's coming straight in. It's warm and it's a hard light source. But it's being followed by a cooler, softer fill of light. There's light coming in all over. That's coming in really strong. But all of this is this softer fill that's cooler in color than this. Note, hard light, warm, soft light, cool, mix, chase. Chase a hard warm light with a soft cool light. I'm going to go try that. That's something I'm going to try. So that came up on this shoot. All right. So what we have a warm hard light, my Mag Beam, with a half CTO, color correction tungsten, half CTO gel in a Mag Beam with the little slit. I'm trying to replicate like a door kind of being open and light coming through it, being chased by a softer light that is cooler in color. So since I took a hot shoe flash and a strobe are about the same color balance, like daylight. So I made this one about half tungsten, and I left that one the same with no gel. So it would be cooler than the hot shoe with the mag beam. All right? And I chased the mag beam with the soft light. So that's a 60-inch soft lighter. 60 inches what? 110 cm-ish? 100, 120 centimeters-ish? Ish. All right? This is another 120. There we go. So I've got a hard light, warm, going in, chased by a soft light, cool. I don't nail what Mother Nature does, but I'm playing with it, right? Taking notes of what I see happening somewhere else and then trying to make that happen here. So this is the, just if you walk into this hallway, this is what it looks like. And that's what I wanted to make it look like. There's 3 lights, 3-light workshop, all right? First light is the mag beam. Throw in that hard light, that slit of light, followed by the second light of the soft lighter. And then I'm simply hand holding a flash with kind of a teal blue gel on it over my head from camera position. And that is adding this kind of gross greenish blue tint to the walls inside the hallway. And I wanted that because of, like, you see old movies that are like movies that take place at old motels. The light's always like green and blue and kind of this sort of like fluorescent neon sign green thing. And I just wanted it to kind of have that sort of kind of like gross place kind of feeling, but like this last light of day is like coming in. All right. Again, just trying to create light that isn't there. I'm using this a lot of taking a hard light. That's actually, believe it or not, the mag beam with the same slit focused. But I'm chasing it with a little more fill from a soft lighter. So this is the ambient light in the kitchen. There wasn't really much at all. Ambient light, if I'm trying to shoot a picture in there with no lighting, this is what I'm going to get. It's just kind of muddy. There's no direction to it. That light over the oven is blowing out and flaring. I don't really care for it all that much. So I'm going to underexpose shutter speed, right? Faster shutter speed. I'm going to cut my ambient exposure down. So now my ambient exposure is down, but look how dark my subject is. So now I have to light my subject. The first thing I come in with is the fill. That's usually opposite. I normally go in with the main light, figure that out, and then add the fill. For some weird reason, I decided to start with the fill. And I wanted to bring the fill in, to fill this in, but at slightly underexposed level. I didn't want to be properly exposed. So it looked like that. It's a little too dark, but it's almost, right? It's almost an acceptable exposure. But you feel like you could go into Lightroom and say, let me add a little more. And that's where the mag beam comes in. And instead of pointing the mag beam directly at my subject, I decided I would just try to like sneak it past and just feather it, just get them in the edge of it so that it wasn't so directional like a razor cutting something out, that it was a little softer. So there's this properly exposed light striking across my subject. You can see it here. You see that kind of like just slightly brighter rectangle? That's the mag beam light hitting the cabinets. But instead of just like hitting my subject straight on with it, I let it just sort of graze past her. And I wanted it to be that kind of like morning light coming into the kitchen. like there might be a little window or a door off over here, and that light's kind of like coming through first thing in the morning. There's kind of just this soft, warm glow in the kitchen, just like you're having to face your day. You're having your coffee, you're having your smoke, like whatever, and you just, what are you going to do with the rest of your day? How are you going to tackle this place? Same kind of thing, but I'm letting the window be the fill, and just kind of sneaking in that mag beam. And I find that when you take that mag beam and you mix it with some fill, it's not quite so harsh. This was my one main shoot that I've done with the GFX 100. I promise you I won't turn this all into a GFX 100 commercial. You know, you're not here for that. But this was with the GFX 100 just before I flew out. But you can see that there's a hard light on her, but there's a nice fill as well. And that fill is all coming from ambient light in the window. Okay. Chaiwala. 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 Chai. 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 What? Yeah, good. That is it for me yammering on up here about all that BS. So let's do like 10-minute break. I'm saying 10 so that y'all will be back within 15. And have a chai, hit the restroom. If you haven't seen the gallery space, that's all still going, right? Right back off over here is the gallery space with some beautiful pictures. Let's be back here in, 15. Let's not make it 30, all right? And we'll get back with the demo, all right? Thank you very much. If we can bring house music back up, that would be awesome.